The conversation around the financial compensation of Africans for trade slavery can be a very difficult topic to approach, to manage, and to also understand. Why is that? Well, on one hand, from the perspective of slaveholders, it is very difficult to assess the damage. It is also very difficult to make sure that they are going to pay, the rightful beneficiaries. On the hand of the victims of slave, or to be more precise, on the hand of descent of slaveholders, it is a situation where a wrong has been perpetrated, but up to now, that wrong has not been, fixed. So, where exactly should we put ourselves? Like, as young Africans, particularly, how delicate this topic is, and what views are actually or could actually be perceived as the right views, and what other views could also be perceived as wrong. Well, from the introduction that I'm making, I want us to understand that in approaching this topic, there's no right or wrong. It is all a matter of argument. It is all a matter of justification. How strong your arguments are, and how or what are, the basis of your arguments. Welcome to your favorite podcast, Smart, Intellectual, Knowledgeable African. I'm S.I.K.A. Before I continue discussing further this very interesting topic, which I am going to keep discussing, more in also the next episode, let me invite you to subscribe, to click on the subscribe button if you're not yet a member of this amazing community, and to also activate the ring bell so that you don't miss out on the coming episodes and also the coming very interesting episode. Well, the question about financial compensation for trade slavery, in my opinion, is very important. It is very important because, as it is right now, there is a reality. The African continent struggles a lot in terms of access to finance. Access to finance is one of the biggest, challenges to the development, the economic development, but also the infrastructure development on the continent. When taking, for instance, the housing sector, you'll see that the investment needs are actually estimated in trillions of dollars if we want to be able to house every African family on the continent. If you also take the health sector, you will also notice that the investment are also estimated in trillions if we want first to improve the existing equipment, the existing health equipment, but if we also want to build new health facilities, and also, bring additional, new health tools to actually make sure that the health system and the healthcare system in Africa, is up to date. So these are actually very few economic sectors, very few, macroeconomic areas where many African countries, need investment. So the question that I want us to ask ourselves is, where exactly are we going to get the money? How can we also get the money? Well, there are actually multiple ways of raising finance, and I am not going to discuss those traditional ways, such as, the capital markets, such as multilateral, donation or concessional loans, etc. Today, I want us to look at another perspective. What about compensation for trade slavery? What about compensation for wrong situation that did happen, but for which, unfortunately, up to now, the victims have not received anything yet? Well, you would think that this is crazy, right? You may think that, look, Philippe S.I.K.A, there's no reason why we should actually try to capitalize on what happened. But in my opinion, I'd say yes. I'll definitely say yes. And I'm going to tell you why. First, what happened centuries ago was wrong. And it was not just wrong from, common sense perspective or from general perception, but it was also wrong in terms of international law, in terms of some legal basis. And the first, legal and judicial tools that I would like to actually use is the Charter of the Nuremberg Tribunal that actually defined crimes against humanity. Remember, trade slavery was considered and is currently being considered as crimes against humanity. But what is exactly the definition of crimes against humanity? Well, according to that charter, it is defined as the murder, the extermination, the enslavement, the deportation, and other inhumane acts committed against any civilian population, whether or not any violation of the domestic law of the country were perpetrated. So, the first point I want us to understand is Africa is currently facing difficult challenges in terms of accessing finance towards meeting its development objectives. And there are actually various ways to come around when it comes to access to finance. You can look at the traditional ways, but you can also come up with original solutions. And in my opinion, the first approach, why it is very critical to actually, reset our mindset and, update the conversation around the financial compensation, of Africans for trade slavery is first because it is still considered as a crime against humanity. And if it is still considered as a crime, then reparation must be done. It is not just a matter of, acknowledging it as a crime without, making sure that we are coming with the right tools and mechanisms to make sure that first, we can assess the damage. Second, we can make sure that those who suffered the damage get some reparation, financially, psychologically, socially, culturally, etc. Well, and my argument is actually based on the legal existence, of international law, like the existence of international principles such as the Charter of the Nuremberg Tribunal, which I just actually read out loud. What's very interesting about that charter is that first, that charter helps us actually, address one concern, one question, one argument, which is being made, quite widely among those that are actually against the motion of financial compensation. Well, what do these people tell? These people believe that because back ago it was somehow legal, to own slaves and to also trade them thanks to what was called chattel slavery, therefore it is not logical to actually try and demand some compensation from a practice that was, you know, considered legal back in those days. And I am inclined to say, well, this may be a valid argument because yes, as a lawyer, I also understand the principle that you are trying, to use to, justify your argument. But in some extent, this is not, like a strong argument because we have principles in international law that already set the record straight. The Charter of the Nuremberg Tribunal said that whether or not what you did was in violation of the domestic law of the country were perpetrated. Meaning that on the negative analysis, even though the practice was recognized then by some domestic laws, it does not mean that it cannot be considered as crimes against humanity. And again, the list is pretty clear. In the list of crimes against humanity, you have any practice that actually leads to murder, extermination, enslavement, deportation, and other inhumane acts committed against any civilian population. So let's have a look at trade slavery. Trade slavery was not perpetrated against military or soldiers. It was mainly focusing on civil population. Second, it was also mainly focusing on a particular race, which was the African race. We need to emphasize that. Therefore, there's actually no room to deflect the conversation and say that, well, because of chattel slavery, like some people were within the right to actually enslave other people and to also trade them. This is completely wrong. Okay? The second argument I would like to make is the following. In international law also, those who commit crimes against humanity must make reparation. It is a widely and internationally accepted principle. Those who commit crimes against humanity must make reparation. It is called the right to reparation. I'm going to pause there. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Thank you for listening to S.I.K.A Talks, the podcast where strong realities meet powerful perspectives. À bientôt.